When the battle ends, the killing becomes intimate, not because the guns are still firing, not because the artillery is still walking the horizon with its slow, indifferent thunder, but because this is the moment when war stops being noise and becomes arithmetic. Flesh time. Hands, a body on a table, another body on the ground, another one outside in the dark, still waiting to be carried in. You learn that the silence after combat is a lie. It is never silent where you are. There is the grinding of truck axles in mud, the cough of generators, the slap of bloody canvas curtains. Men calling for morphine they will not get. Men calling for mothers who are thousands of miles away, or already dead, or too far inside memory to answer. There is the clatter of metal basins, the rip of uniforms cut open from throat to groin, the low voice of an exhausted nurse asking for more gauze as if gauze were something the world could still provide in unlimited supply. And there is your table. Under the lamp, it shines with water, iodine, and blood. That lamp becomes its own kind of sun. Everything outside it is darkness, speculation, rumor, fear. Everything beneath it is certainty. Torn femoral artery, open abdomen, sucking chest wound, frostbite blackening 3 toes, powder burns around the clavicle, mud in the wound, cloth in the wound, bone where bone should not be seen. This is where your war begins. Out there, men imagine battle as a charge, a burst, a flag and smoke, history made in seconds. But for you, history arrives on stretchers. It comes with tags tied to wrists. It comes with boots, still laced. It comes with wedding rings, broken dog tags, bits of family photographs, soaked through with rain and blood until the faces blur into pink pulp. It comes shivering even in summer. It comes staring at the tent ceiling as if the canvas itself is a sky that can still be prayed into opening. And you, standing under that light, are expected to decide who remains in the world. Not in theory, not eventually. Now, you were not born for this. That is one of the first illusions war strips from you. No one is born for this. No child grows toward this table. No hand was made to slide into another man's body to pinch an artery between 2 fingers, while someone else searches for clamps that ran out an hour ago. You came here through cleaner rooms first. Lecture halls. Anatomy theaters that smelled of wax and disinfectant instead of rot and cordite. Bright diagrams. Latin words. Orderly incisions. Controlled bleeding. Patients with names, charts, futures. Back then, medicine still felt like a profession. Then the train cars arrived. Then the letters came. Then the uniforms changed the posture of everyone around you. Even language changed. Cases became casualties. Patients became numbers. Supplies became tonnage. Delay became death. And skill, your cherished, hard-earned skill, was broken apart and rebuilt into something harder, faster, crueler. In the field, perfection is worthless. Elegance is useless. There is only what stops the bleeding before the heart empties itself. That is the first transformation, not from civilian to soldier, from doctor to selector. Because the worst wound in the tent is not always the first body you touch. He is 19, maybe 20. Belly torn open by shrapnel, conscious. Trying to sit up. His hands keep reaching down in confusion, as if he cannot understand why his own warmth is spilling out of him. Beside him lies a man with a shattered jaw and a chest full of fragments, gasping in wet, bubbling pools. Behind them, another has lost a foot. Another has lost an eye. Another is quiet in the way that makes everyone move faster. And you do not have enough time. This is the secret civilians do not want from war medicine. The field surgeon is not the hero who saves everyone. The field surgeon is the one who understands, often before anyone else, that everyone will not be saved. You sort the living by how close they are to becoming dead and how much work it would take to interrupt that process. Immediate. Delayed. Expectant. Walking wounded. Words so dry they almost sound humane. Then you pin the tag to a sleeve, and a life changes category because of your handwriting. The first time you mark a man as expectant, your fingers hesitate. He is still breathing. He is looking at you. That is what makes it unbearable. The dead ask nothing. The dying ask everything with their eyes. You tell yourself, there are others you can save. You tell yourself resources matter. You tell yourself this is triage, not cowardice. This is duty, not murder. Then you move on, and a part of you does not. The night teaches speed. Dawn teaches consequence. Hours pass without shape. A tourniquet twists tight. A leg comes off above the knee because below the knee would leave too much dead tissue. Ether is thin. Morphine is thinner. A nurse faints and wakes furious, apologizing as if exhaustion were a breach of discipline. Someone vomits behind a screen. Someone prays in a language you do not understand. Someone sings for 30 seconds while delirium lifts him clear out of the tent and back into some clean summer field that has never heard artillery. You keep your hands moving. Cut, clamp, tie, pack, saw, suture. There is a rhythm to it, and that rhythm is dangerous. It can begin to feel like mastery. It can begin to feel like control. The body opens the same way often enough that you start believing war can be managed with steel and nerve and repetition. Then a shell lands near the receiving station. The canvas trembles. Dirt rains down. One of the lanterns swings, and suddenly a fresh row of stretchers is coming in before the first row is even cold. That is when you understand the second transformation. You are not fighting death. You are negotiating with Volume 1 body. You can study. 10 bodies you can organize. 50 bodies arriving in waves from a ridge still smoking under moonlight. That is no longer medicine in the old sense. That is logistics conducted inside the human form. How many minutes for debridement? How many units of plasma left? How many hands available? How many can be stabilized for evacuation before roads become artillery targets again by first light? The war teaches you to think like a butcher and a mathematician, and still somehow remain a physician. That balancing act becomes your private ruin, because the more competent you become, the less visible your damage looks from the outside. Your movements sharpen. Your voice lowers. Panic leaves you. Junior medics watch you with a kind of awe because you do not tremble when the femoral spurts, because you can amputate in minutes, because you can glance at skin tone, pulse, pupil response, and know who is already half gone. They mistake your calm for strength. It is not strength. It is compartmentalization, so severe it begins to alter the architecture of the self. You learn to eat standing up, sometimes beside the dead. You learn the exact texture of blood drying beneath fingernails. You learn that the smell of open bowel does not leave with washing, only with time, and sometimes not even then. You learn that sleep is not rest if every time you close your eyes, you see the table lamp reflected in pooled blood like a second moon. And you learn that memory is selective in a merciless way. You will forget names. You will remember boots. A missing button. A photograph of 2 children tucked inside a tunic pocket. The way one soldier apologized to you for bleeding on your sleeve. The way another kept asking whether his horse was safe, though there had been no horse anywhere near that front for months. It is not the grand spectacle that haunts you. It is the absurdly small. A spoon in a breast pocket bent inward by shrapnel. A rosary tangled around an IV line. The sound scissors make when cutting through wet wool. The heat of a severed limb through a blanket. The impossible politeness of the dying. These details become your afterlife while you are still alive. And still the work continues. There are no clean endings here. No bugles. No final shot fading into mournful music. Battle ends on paper. In your tent, endings come unevenly. One man survives the operation, then drowns in his own lungs 3 hours later. Another is certain to die, and somehow lives out of pure animal refusal. A third loses both legs, wakes, understands instantly, and says nothing at all. You watch men learn the shape of their future from your face before you even speak. That is another skill war gives you. The ability to become a mirror no one wants to look into. You become careful with truth. Not because you are cruel, because language itself becomes triage. We've stopped the bleeding. You're going to be moved soon. Stay with me. Look at me. These phrases are part medicine, part command, part prayer. Sometimes they are honest. Sometimes they are the only structure left between a terrified mind and total collapse. You do not always know which is which when you say them. That uncertainty follows you deeper than any wound. There is a moment, different for every surgeon, when you realize you have crossed a line you cannot uncross. It may happen at 3 in the morning while sawing through bone with a dull instrument. because the sharp one snapped earlier that night. It may happen when you eat with bloody hands because stopping to wash would cost someone else his life. It may happen when the order comes to move the hospital and the men too unstable to transport must be left with one medic, limited morphine, and instructions no one has the courage to say aloud. Or it may happen after the convoy leaves, after the cots are folded, after the canvas comes down, after you find in the pocket of your coat a tag with a number on it and cannot remember which face belonged to it. That is when the real fracture begins. During battle, identity is simple. You work, you decide. You endure. Action protects you from interpretation. But afterward, when there is finally enough quiet for thought to enter the room, you are forced to meet the person who made those decisions. The one who cut, denied, saved, abandoned, lied gently, lied efficiently, and kept moving. And the question waiting there is not whether you were right. It is whether being necessary has changed what you can bear. Years later, people will ask what it was like. They will do it carefully, respectfully, sometimes with genuine compassion, sometimes with the hunger people have for proximity to horror. They never had to survive. They want stories with shape. They want tragedy redeemed by skill. They want to believe that in the worst machinery ever built by man, there remained a few clean roles. The brave soldier, the merciful doctor, the life saved at the last second. You can give them some of that. Not all of it. You can tell them about exhaustion, about ingenuity, about courage, so ordinary and unadvertised it still humbles you. A nurse holding pressure on an artery for 40 straight minutes because there was no clamp left. An orderly carrying 3 men out of a shelled ward and going back for a 4th. A wounded radio operator translating his own operative notes because no one else spoke his language. These things were real. They matter. But if you told the whole truth, it would sound less like heroism and more like consumption. War consumes tissue, time instruments, morphine, linen, sleep, youth, words. It consumes categories you once trusted. Before war, healing meant restoration. In war, healing often means reduction. Remove the limb, remove the eye, remove the bowel, remove the hope that the body can be returned intact. You do not restore men to what they were. You salvage what can still continue. That is why the table stays with you, not just as an object, as a judgment. Even now, in safe rooms, under electric lights, in peacetime hospitals with polished floors and sterilizers humming behind closed doors, part of you still measures every emergency against that old lamp over wet canvas. Every complaint sounds different once you have heard a teenager ask, with both legs gone, whether he can still dance with the girl he planned to marry. Every delay feels obscene once you have counted a pulse with one hand while holding a retractor with the other, and knowing help is 3 minutes too far away. You become difficult to reassure. That is the private tax of survival in a role like yours. People imagine trauma as a wound. Often it is a reconfiguration. The world does not break in front of you and then heal neatly over. It rearranges its weights. What used to matter less now matters more. What used to feel urgent now feels theatrical. You walk through ordinary life aware of the hidden fragility inside every human shape. Neck, abdomen, groin, armpit. You know too much about where a person comes apart. And yet, strangely, that knowledge does not make you hate life. It makes you suspicious of waste. A sunrise no longer feels decorative. Bread is not simple. Warm water is not simple. A train arriving on time can feel like a miracle. A room with enough light to see clearly can feel holy. This is the bitterness and the dignity of what happened to you. War narrowed your moral world until everything was reduced to urgent essentials. Then peace returned and expected you to expand again, politely, as if narrowing had left no scar. But you have seen too much of what humans become when stripped to necessity. You know how thin civilization really is. Canvas thin, gauze thin, skin thin. That knowledge isolates you. Not because no one loves you, because love alone cannot translate what the table taught. The table taught that mercy is often violent, that speed can be kinder than tenderness, that a hand can heal and mutilate in the same motion. That competence is not innocence. That some nights the best thing you do is save 3 men and fail 7, then stand up straight enough to receive the 8th. It taught you that the battle does not end where the shooting stops. It moves inward, into memory, into posture, into the half-second pause before sleep, into the way your hands still become absolutely steady in crisis and strangely uncertain in peace, into the old dreams where the lamp flickers, the canvas snaps in winter wind, and someone is calling for you from just beyond the curtain, and you already know, before you pull it back, that there will not be enough time. That is the final cruelty. Not that you remember the dead. It is that you remember the unfinished, the operation interrupted by shelling, the convoy that never returned, the face you nearly recognized in a pile of coats, the man you marked expectant who might, under other circumstances, under another sky, in another hospital, with another supply train, have lived. Medicine trains you to believe in causality, input, intervention, outcome. War replaces that with probability and mud, so you carry a ledger no one can audit. Not on paper, inside. A tally of hands held down, a tally of limbs removed, a tally of voices that faded while you were working on someone else. A tally of mornings you walked outside after operating all night and found birds still singing as if the earth had made no note of what had happened under canvas a few feet away. Years pass. Uniforms are packed away. Maps yellow. The names of battles become chapter headings in other people's books. The public remembers advances, retreats, commanders. But your war remains smaller and closer. 6 feet of table. 1 lamp. Steam rising from a basin of pink water. The stubborn beat of a pulse against your fingers. The moment it disappears. The moment, now rare and unforgettable, when it does not. And maybe that is the nearest thing to meaning you are ever allowed. Not victory, not closure, certainly not purity. Only this, that in a place built for destruction, your hands learn to interrupt it, briefly, imperfectly, at cost. You were never outside the machine, but under that lamp, night after night, you forced it to fight for every inch. A breath longer, a heartbeat longer, long enough for one more letter to be written, long enough for one more son to come home altered instead of absent, long enough, sometimes, for life to remain life. And when people speak of the battle, they will almost always speak of where it was fought. They will name the ridge, the river, the village, the line. You will remember the table, because that was the place where the battle ended for everyone one at a time, and where, for you, it never entirely did.